Whether these women struggled to survive or they reveled in newfound skills, they worried about their husbands and sons. And many of them commented on the loneliness of their wartime lives. Their plight was captured in the verse of that popular song, "Here I sit on Buttermilk Hill. Who can blame me, cry my fill, and every tear would turn a mill since Johnny has gone for a soldier." One has only to look at the exchanges, sometimes melancholy, between Abigail and John Adams to realize that the pain of separation and the anxiety that accompanied the potential dangers of war were always there. Even the feistiest of women, like Lucy Flucker Knox, who was nobody's shrinking violet, the wife of General Henry Knox, succumbed to depression and despair. Lucy was more alone than most, for her loyalist parents had gone into exile in England, and her husband had gone to war. "I return home," she wrote to her dear Harry, "to find myself entirely alone, to reflect that the only friend I have in the world is such an immense distance from me. My poor heart is ready to burst." Like many poorer women, Lucy Knox found relief from her loneliness by picking herself up and traveling to join her husband at every winter encampment. Lucy relished her times with the army and with the other generals' wives, so much so that she resented any attempt by her husband to discourage her from coming. She also resisted leaving. While winters at Valley Forge or Monmouth might seem to us a dismal prospect, they were a welcome relief for Lucy, who felt her life was otherwise barren of adventure and replete with repetition. Now, when she, or Martha Washington, or Katie Green went to join the military, they were put up in a home, and they had privates work as their servants in the home. That is, military men work for them. They were waited on at the table, they gave parties, and they lifted the morale of the officers. But the women who came on the whole, who were known as camp followers, were the wives, sweethearts, and daughters of common soldiers. And I would now like to talk about my pet peeve. I'm sure you all know that iconic picture of Valley Forge. All men. Soldiers are trudging through the snow, right? The tents are there. You would think Valley Forge was a stag party. Actually, Valley Forge was an immediate city. Women, children, dogs, their favorite goat, their rocking chair, their favorite pot, arrived by the hundreds every time the army settled down for the winter, anywhere it settled down. These women came because they were hungry, because they were afraid their children would freeze, and because they were afraid they would be attacked by British soldiers. And they poured into the military camps. Instant urbanization. So that picture of Valley Forge is a lie. All of these army camps were filled with women and children, and Washington hated it. Washington really did not want them there, but he never sent them home. Because, in fact, if he sent them home, he knew their husbands would go with them, that it would increase desertion. So he set them to work. And women were a vital part of the American Army. They were the quartermaster corps supreme. They gathered the wood for the food, they cooked the food, they did the nursing in the camp hospitals. And let me just make another little aside and talk to you about lice. Lice is very important in the American Revolution. The young boys, working class boys who joined the army, came in whatever clothes they had. And like my son, who's quite brilliant and can take apart a computer, he could not understand how to work the washing machine. So these boys, who assumed that washing clothes was a woman's job, just stayed in the clothes they were in. And they stayed in them and stayed in them and stayed in them, and they got lice. And they did what my son would do. They scratched. And they scratched and scratched, and they got scabs. So they had open sores on their body. They were also a little bored sitting around, because a lot of war is like baseball. You know, you sit around and sit around, nothing happens, and then all of a sudden. So they invented games. As I tell my students, they didn't have video games to play with or a Wii or, So they invented a competitive game that was called, let's throw tar and see how many lice we can kill. And so they threw hot tar at the lice on their arms and legs, and then they counted up how many they killed. And then they had burns on their body as well. I never said teenage boys were smart. So the fella in charge of reporting how many men were battle ready would regularly have to say in the early year of the war, well, we have 5 or 6 guys who are covered with scabs and covered with burns, and they can't fight. Well, Washington understood it might be a good idea to have women come and do the laundry. And if women had not come and done the laundry, I don't know if we would have won the war. So women were in the camps, they were performing valuable service, and in exchange for that, they got half the rations the men got, and they did not get paid. Every commanding officer realized how important their services were and appreciated the presence of camp followers for all of these reasons. Now, in the forts, camp followers often became soldiers, for when their husbands fell beside the cannons that they were manning, wounded or killed, wives took up their posts, loading and firing over the fortress walls. The men called all of these women Molly Pitchers. I hope none of you are from New Jersey, because I'm now going to say something about New Jersey. New Yorkers love to do that. New Jersey has a rest stop called the Molly Pitcher Rest Stop. There is no such person. No such person. I keep thinking I should write a letter to the governor and point this out. There's no such person. They were called Molly pitchers, as I'm sure most of you know, because they carried pitchers of water out from the buildings, the safety of the buildings, to cool down the cannons. So the men would fire the cannon, they would shout, "Molly pitcher," and some woman would come running out with this pitcher of water. Sometimes they were killed as they ran across the open field. Sometimes they were wounded, and often they took their husband or someone else's position at the cannon if they were killed. We have that iconic picture of this woman who was Mary Ludwig, not Molly Pitcher, firing up the cannon because her husband had fallen wounded by the enemy.